Hi. So,
Hi.
hi, I'm Mary Langfield, and I'm having an opportunity to chat with one of my most amazing clients, somebody I feel so lucky to know and have gotten to work with. So, this is Amy Carrier, and Amy is a coach. She has a background in hypnotherapy. She runs these amazing wilderness and adventure events for women. They're not just outdoors, but it's around wellness. And she's just an all around very diverse and adventurous human. And I'm just so excited to share her with you and share a little bit about her journey, what it was like working together, so that you get an example of what might be possible for you or why this might be of interest to working together. So, Amy, is there anything else you'd like to introduce or share about you? Because you have a big history, you have a lot of you have a lot of experience.
I do. My life has been very diverse, and we'll probably hit on that a little bit as we chat. But
Yeah. So, one of the things that I love about Amy is, like I said, she's adventurous. She has experience traveling and living abroad. And these are all things that I think so many of us are intrigued by. So hearing a little bit about her story and a little bit about her, I think will just be really fascinating anyway. So we worked together, and first we had a call to see if it seemed like a good fit. And this was a couple years ago now. And you called and you were telling me how you were doing. Do you remember what it was like back then? Like what kinds of things were going on that you felt needed to change?
sure. Well, I think I'm just going to give you a little further background. I worked in a professional setting in a marketing role for 12 years. And at the end of that 12 years, my health was declining. I needed to make some positive changes in my life. So um, this is not a change that most people make, but I quit my job and I moved to New Zealand. But while I was over there, I discovered someone over there that was labeled a life coach. And I was like, well, that's extremely fascinating. So I started to think about, like, if I was making a career change and making changes in my life that would better suit me and improve my health, like maybe that's something I could do. So I started exploring schools, and this is back in 2012. I enrolled in a life coaching program and became a hypnotherapist and got all the training, um, which is amazing. And I kind of, when I went through the program, I was like, you know what, if I just help one person a year, then it was worth all the money. But back then, I don't think that I was in the right place to step into my power and like own who I was. So I kind of like had this part of me that I know is a huge part of me kind of like stuffed away, whether it's packed in a suitcase or in a box. It was like up on a shelf. Um, and so I've had various experiences. And right before the pandemic, I was living in Korea and I was teaching over there. And I really loved having that worldly experience. But like, I was working as a teacher because I've been working in education for the last 10 years. Or in some capacity working with children. And I was so burnt out when I got home. And then it's like you throw a pandemic on top of it. And then I just felt slightly lost when I got home. And I was like, one thing I learned in my coaching program, that every coach has a coach. And so I'm a huge proponent for seeking help, having an outside individual kind of to bounce ideas off of, or different things like that. So I knew my friend had worked with you. And so I was like that person behind the computer, like kind of like watching you from afar and thinking like, she seems really cool. Like I would like to do that. And so I would probably say I was not in the greatest headspace when we first met. I knew that I needed help, but I didn't feel like I was worth the investment. Um, and so when we had that first call, like I was scared, and I like, and this is someone who like believes in all this stuff. And I was still scared to like invest in myself and make the commitment, the time commitment, the monetary commitment, and just, you know, and also that, you know, there's always like a fear sometimes when we try new things that like, maybe this won't work too. Like maybe this will just, you know, be another thing I try that isn't successful, but I took the leap. And so that's kind of where it's a little bit of a longer story, but that's kind of how I got to you.
I think you brought up a really important piece, because that's one of the things I feel really strongly about when people are going to invest in themselves. I'm like, are you ready to make the time and take that energy? It's like, I told you, I'm like, I'm less concerned about you worrying about the money piece. Like that will work itself out. Are you ready to do the work? Right.
Right. And I remember you asking me that, and like, you asked it very like point blank, and it was kind of like, well, I wouldn't be on this call if I wasn't ready. But it's like, that's you have to like look at yourself and be like, am I?
Right.
And I feel like that's any change. Right. And I think, you know, it's hard. I probably wear my heart on my sleeve and get more vulnerable than most people do. And it was still hard for me to be like, am I really in a place where I want to dig down? But I was kind of, my wheels were spinning and I was not taking inspired action, and I knew that I needed help.
Yeah. And so you got back in touch with me about 4 to 5 months later, right? Something like that.
Was it that long? Oh my gosh.
I have right here. We talked. Maybe
you have the notes. I don't know.
What?
I feel
you're right. No, you're right. It wasn't that long. So
I had stalked you online for a really long time before we made that initial call. But I think once we made the initial call and kind of talked about it was
just a couple months. Yeah. Then it was just a couple months. So awesome. So this is the thing that I think is really an interesting piece to working with a coach, is that what were you hoping to get out of it? Right. You were feeling stuck. You were feeling a little bit, I have my notes. We were feeling a little unsure of that. Do these experiences that I have really give me the opportunity to share? Like, am I worth doing the work with others?
Right.
Right. And then there's also, like you said, you were exhausted, you were burnt out, and this was physically affecting your body, not just your body, but your mind, your soul. Like there was a heaviness.
Right. Heaviness was definitely, and then I would probably say like also a level of disappointment in myself, because unfortunately I've lived this very colorful life that I am extremely proud of. I have amazing stories to share and experience to share with people. But I sometimes carry this weight, is that you're only as good as what you're currently doing, not the mosaic of who you are. And when I got back from Korea, like it was like the world was shut down, and like I was like, well, now what? And so I kind of just kept taking steps, but I was like, where I was at that point felt very temporary, and I was like, you know what? It is time for me to take that box off the shelf, open it, see what's inside, see if this is still relevant, and see what we can do with this. Because I was inspired by the things that I saw you doing, and there was other people in my life that were doing really cool things, and I was like, maybe it's time for me to do something cool.
Yeah, that was something that was just coming up for me, is that one of the things that I think people who are drawn to work with me, it's like you have this feeling within you that there's so much that you want to share, but there's been fear or disappointments or whatever that's kind of kept you capped, right? Like a person feeling like, I have so much I want to share, but I don't know if I don't know if I can, or I don't know what my capacity is, or I don't even know where to go, but I know that I've like this purpose and it's somewhere. So what do I do?
Right.
Yeah. I think that that's something that is huge. And at the same time, that goes with that thing I'm always talking about, we're recovering perfectionists. Like we don't want to go all out if we don't know, one, what if we don't know how to do it? Two, like, I don't even know how to get started because it needs to be a certain thing. And so we get in our own way because we want it to look, we have this idea of what we think it should look like. But really, once we get out of that, like that's where things happen.
I also think a really important thing that I took away from this process is that as a perfectionist, as of someone who spent majority of my life worrying about what other people thought about me, I didn't hold a lot of self-love. Mm-hmm. And I think that that was one of my number one goals when I came to you, is like, if I walk away and like myself more, that would be a win. And it's still an ongoing process. Obviously, there's still things I want to work on. Obviously, there's, but I love myself more than I ever have. And it was different things that we did along the way that were like, that made me like look at myself and made me sit down and do inventories. And we can dive a little more into that, and then challenge myself to the point where I was proud of myself. So it was kind of like this building blocks that get there, that it's quite I wish I could have loved myself the way that I do now earlier in life, but it took time, and I appreciate the guidance and the encouragement that I got through coaching with you.
So now you've stepped into a whole new kind of life that, and it's still coming together, right? Because it's a whole journey, but you've been hearing things from your friends, your family, like when you think about the transformation or the changes, the growth, the evolution since just doing this work for yourself, like what are the things that strike you that other people say and you go, oh yeah, and I did notice that? Or because I know your mother was like, I am so proud of you for doing this.
Right. So it's like one of those things, like, even though I'm an adult, I still want my mom's approval. So it was like, oh, I signed up for this thing and I'm going to do some coaching. And she's always like, well, like, she's supportive, but like also, asks the questions that sometimes you don't want to like, announce to somebody. And it was probably because I did the 6-month program, and I think it was probably like a couple months after, because she wasn't around me when I was going through the bulk of the program. And I moved back to the area to be closer to my parents, back to the Midwest. And so when I was just, different things in life would come up, she would just be like, wow, like that was the best money you ever spent. She's like, watching you handle situations like you've never, or just like your progression and what you're accomplishing right now. She's like, it's like next level. And, just to have, maybe it's like, I still want her approval, but just to have that outside person, like, because sometimes you don't recognize the positive changes that you made. Yeah. Sometimes it's an external source being like, wow, that's not how you used to handle that. And what triggered you before no longer triggers you, or you just have this different energy about you or confidence. And I needed someone to tell me that, because I felt it, but then it's like hearing it back from a third party was really powerful. And then I just feel like we can dive into this a little more too, but you gave me homework and you challenged me to do different things. And I know this is probably one of your questions, but like the number one thing that you started me off doing was weekly wins. And so I got to celebrate myself, and it was like, recognize the small wins, recognize the big things. And I loved that practice. And then it's like, doing personal inventories, like, whoa, what's amazing about you? And it's like nice to sit down and write a list of all the internal and external things about yourself that are great. But then another piece of homework that really sticks out to me is that you were like, you tell me that you feel like your purpose is to help people. Okay, now your homework is to like put that into action. And I was inspired to start hosting events for women and events also for children, called Wilderness and Wellness, where I take women in the area out into nature, whether it's a hike or snowshoeing. And we do mindfulness practices all through. And I started in July and I've already hosted 10 events. I've had over 150 women attend. And just where it started as an idea, like over a year and a half, like, you know, whenever we started coaching, to where it is now, like I'm so incredibly proud of that. And I feel like I'm living my purpose.
Yeah, like crying. I know, I'm so proud of you.
It's just like, and you know, it's a lot of work. And it really, I pour my heart and soul into it. But at the end of the day, when someone comes back to me and is like, I had this huge breakthrough, or you know, this situation resolved itself because of the activity we did, it's like, that is why we do what we do, right? And I feel like I needed someone like you to remind me that I was worthy and that I had what it took to step up and be who I was meant to be and to help other people live out my purpose. So
like, yeah. It's like I'm like totally crying because it's so like where she was, I can relate to. And I think so many of us can. Like, you were feeling so stuck and you were like, I've had this education, I have this experience, I have like, even just my friends and people who are in my circles, like want my advice. They want to know what I think. They want what I have. And they, you know, and you weren't able to get out of your own way and start doing it. Right. And I do. I remember you were like, I don't, you know, you were like so hesitant. And I was like, no, just do it. It's going to be fine. It's like, and then, you know, and here's the thing about the way that I coach that I find to be different than other coaches is it's like, I do give homework and I do come back and we have goals. And one of the things was, you know, Amy wanted to make sure that she was doing the thing when she felt ready. And I was like, well, we're never going to feel ready. So we're just going to do it. And so I was on your butt about write the description.
Right.
When is this? When are you doing it? You know, like it was just like, and breaking things down into steps. And so sometimes, again, us perfectionists, we get so caught up in the how that we can't even get started. And so I think that when you start allowing yourself to just put things into motion and do it little by little, you know, that's something I'm really a big proponent of. And I think that you, like you said, with the homework, it's like we were building, right? It wasn't like, let's do all the things. You already know all the things. You're not doing them, right?
Right.
That was probably something we talked about on our call. It's like, yep, you have all the tools. You already know what you could or should or whatever. And it's not about that. It's about making things manageable so that you can actually get where you want to go. Right.
Right.
And like I said, I'm just so unbelievably excited and proud of you. And the fact that like you said, with the people who come to your events, like it's so amazing to get to be part of something and feel like I'm doing what I'm meant to do. And now you're feeling like you're on your way to doing what you're meant to do. And we don't have to put a cap on that. This is where you are now. Who knows where you'll be in 2 years or 5 years or whatever. You'll be doing maybe something even a little bit different.
Right. And I think one thing is that it's a ripple effect, right? So it's like you set out on your journey, my journey, our paths intertwined. And then the skills that I gained from working with you, even though they may have already been tools in my chest, like in my tool chest, I needed to like have someone encourage me to use them. And then I'm taking those tools forward. And then one thing, you know, obviously personal development is a priority and I am always working on myself. But one of the most amazing things that has grown out of this and just the circumstances of my life bringing me back to the Midwest is this sense of community. And I think like post pandemic, I think there's division, but like, I think so many people are craving community and connection, and women, I just see them like stepping into their power on all levels and challenging themselves. Like last weekend, I led 30 women on a snowshoe hike into the woods, and people were like, oh my gosh, like I can do this. Like I'm in my 50s or whatever, or, you know, like I don't feel like I'm physically fit, but I did this. I can do hard things.
Yes.
And I think like when you surround yourself with positive people, and like, you know, when I did the one-on-one coaching, and I highly recommend doing the one-on-one coaching with you, I also was like, I need more of this. So then that's why I've continued to sign up for your various programs, whether it was like, oh my gosh, what was it? Journey to Self. I signed up for that program because it's just like a check-in. And then you, even though it's online, it's like it's a community. It's a space where, you know, there's a lot of tears, there's a lot of celebration, there's a lot of movement. And those are all things that I need. And that's one thing I also feel like working with you is like, now I recognize what I need. You know, like this next month, I signed up for a yoga program with someone local, like we're going to do in classes. And I'm taking a month off from my own events because I'm going inward, and I'm making sure, you know, I've been fighting colds like all winter long and different things. And so I'm like, I need to take some time, care for me, and then I'll go back out, you know? So it's like,
right.
But that's part of the process too, is honoring. You don't have to always be everything for everybody all the time. You have to look out for yourself first,
right.
and incorporate that self-care or whatever that is for you. I mean, it doesn't mean like always working with a coach or doing yoga or meditating. Like it
right.
could be reading a book, but it's figuring out who you are and what makes you tick.
And I think that one of the things that we worked on too was you allowing yourself to own your boundaries, right? And,
right,
you know, boundaries with others and being able to voice your needs. And then at the same time, also boundaries with yourself. Like, hey, I said I wanted to do this. I need to show up for myself.
Right. And that actually was probably a really tough thing for me this year, because I've always been a people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a couple people who I no longer let into my life. I set up some pretty strong boundaries, and, you know, it's like I had to, and that was really hard. This is like probably TMI, but you know, people who I'd cared about for a really long time, I was like, I'm not saying that people always have to add value to my life, but if it's detracting and making me feel unworthy, then it doesn't align. And I wish you well. But you know, like that's about learning your own worth and knowing and understanding what the idea of setting a boundary is.
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's a couple other areas in your life. Like, so, you know, this is a big one, I think, for a lot of us that are kind of on a spiritual journey and are interested in, like, I don't know, like taking this lifetime and doing something that we feel is really meaningful, whether that's your career or something else. But, you know, there's that aspect. And then there's also like the physical health and all of that. You know, obviously you were feeling really depleted. There was a couple other things that were going on before, and some of those things shifted greatly and some of those things didn't, but there's a couple things in your life that you really resisted. And then you decided, like, wait, I'm going to explore this and allow this because, you know, I'm letting it kind of run my life. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know if I know what you're talking about. I mean, obviously and unfortunately, I'm just getting over a really bad cold, so I'm not optimal health, but I definitely, for me, this is probably still an area that needs to be coached around or worked around, which is why I still continue to sign up for your programs. Because just because I did the 6-month program I mean, I made huge strides as a human, but there's still plenty of areas. And so my physical being, it is always a struggle for me. I recently was told again that I really need to eliminate dairy and gluten. And that is a message that's been coming through for 12 years. And it's like, I sometimes also get in the mindset when someone tells me you can't have something, I'm like, well, I'm going to do it all. So
Yeah.
this is still like an area that, you know, that's a work in progress for me for sure. But I think one thing I will say is this is still very much a work in progress, but because I do have more love for myself and feel more worthy, I don't feel at the same spot. Like, even though maybe something physically hasn't changed for my exterior, I feel differently about myself. You know, I don't know if that's like, if I'm talking about what you were alluding to, but
maybe a little bit. But I think what's really important with what you just said is that, again, so many of us never give ourselves credit. So like so in this example that Amy gave, which was a little bit coded, but like, if there are certain things in her physical life that she'd like to change, let's say this isn't the case, but like maybe joint pain or hip pain or, you know, whatever. If you start feeling better in your life, things impact you or trigger you less. And so there's more ease going through any difficulties. And I think that that's a huge win that most of us will not give ourselves credit for, will not give the situation credit for. And then we just let it be, again, something heavy, feeling like an anchor, feeling like we're getting nowhere, which just ends up spinning and us being in a place that we don't enjoy. So there's like, right, when you change your perspective on things, your physical ailments, they bother you less, right?
Right.
But I think there's something
or you're willing to, because you've already invested in yourself and you know it's worth the effort, you're more willing to make changes or try new things, whereas you're not just going to be stagnant and complain about it. Right. And I think I see a lot of people get there, like they don't see a way out or they won't find a solution. And I just don't feel that anymore. It's like, you know what? I am dealing with like some of the things I mentioned, and I have a plan. I made a plan for April. It's very much it's a very specific plan. And I'm excited to kind of see how I feel at the end of the month.
So with that, I'm assuming, so one of the things that we had worked on and one of the things that you are interested in expanding around is your being in touch with your intuitive knowledge, with your inner knowing, with, you know, the things that you felt like you had a clue about. Like, that's an area that you spent a lot of time focused on.
Right. That has been an interesting journey, because when my intuitiveness really kicked in, it was kind of out of left field and scary at times and confusing. And so I feel like that's still a very, very much a journey I'm on, but I feel like it's easier now for me to recognize like what's real, what's not real, and check in with myself to see if things align.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I don't know.
It does. I think that a lot of time, you know, Amy happens to be extremely intuitive, and it's a matter of allowing yourself to trust what's coming up. And I think a lot of this process, you know, is getting out of your own way and trusting that what you are doing is worth it. Trust that what you are doing and where you are going is actually the right thing, instead of, you know, human design is a little bit of something that we talked about, and Amy has some unique aspects about her chart, and leaning into those instead of thinking of these aspects of yourself as a problem or an area that needs improvement, instead of just being like, oh, this is who I am and this is what I do in order to honor that. Right.
Right. And I will say that that is really a unique aspect about coaching with you, is that you do when you start with you do those like basic walkthrough where you get to just kind of lay everything on the table, emotionally, physically, all those things. And then you make up a remedy to kind of guide you through that process. You, based on our information, do the human design chart, which gives you insight on who we are and gives us insight, because, that's not something that, that's like a newer concept for most people, right? The idea of human design. So yeah. And I think I would agree, like, my chart definitely says that I'm open, that I receive a lot of information. And it's kind of like, before I was like, what is all this? Like, are these my thoughts? Like, are these my feelings? Like, I'm confused. This is making me confused and sad. But now it's like, I more own it. I'm like, yeah, bring it in. Like, that's still like, I still feel like I'm a baby in that intuitive journey. But I definitely, it makes me go rewind and look at things in the past and realize like, oh, I was right about that situation. And I was right about that person, or I was right. Like, because, this is a term a lot of people hear, now it's like more of a buzzword, but like, there were a lot of situations in my life where I was gaslighted, and I knew in my gut, like, or saw things and was like, I think this is what it is. And then it's all like, no, that's not what it is. And it's like, now it's like, I learned to trust those voices more and trust myself more, versus looking for all those external confirmations, that I used to really rely on heavily.
Right. So I was just taking a peek at your goals, because I remember you were really surprised that I think it was like 3 or 4 months into the 6 months, and you're like, I've hit all my goals. Like, I need new goals. It was, you were just kind of like, oh, that's crazy. So I remember, and for me, again, as a coach, because I've worked, as you said, like, it's important to work with a coach if you're a coach, and I've worked with many. And what's unique about the process that I've noticed, because other coaches don't do it this way, is having that set of goals. Like, you might have one goal, like, oh, I just want to be rid of this problem, but like breaking down and looking at your life holistically, right? So we are looking at different areas. You looked at your career, you looked at your relationships, you looked at your health, you looked at your spirituality. And, one of the things,
to do a complete overhaul.
But I think that, as you had sort of stated at the beginning, one of the things that is just so important in this evolution and in how things have changed for you is how you relate to who you are, right? You find yourself worthy, and you feel more on track because you honor who you are. And that allows you to show other people how they could treat themselves, right, and the cascade, right? And one of the goals that you had was just connecting more spiritually to, whatever it is that works for you.
Right. And I also think that one thing that you need to remember is, like, when you sit down and you write those goals, and then you look back to see if you've achieved them, they sometimes work out in a completely different way. Or even if you don't check that box, it's almost like you have to be like, but look at all the other things that I did do. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, completely. Because again, it's about figuring out how to give yourself credit for all that you're doing and where you've gotten. Yeah. Because I think typically, if you are doing this on your own, like, as somebody who's done a lot of work on my own, you get lost on seeing your progress. So like you said, sometimes it's nice. Like, my mom said this, or, friends are saying this, and people are coming to these events and they're telling me X, Y, or Z. And it's like, oh yeah, that is something that I do or provide, or who I am, and being able to honor it more. Right. because I call this like the plateau. Like sometimes you get all this progress and then you're sitting and you're like, well, I'd like this to change still, this to change still, like we still have a list of things that we'd like to improve on or to heal or whatever. But like, we still have to honor the progress, because if we don't honor the progress, then it's like we backslide and it's like, well, why did we bother? And it's like, if you can't honor where you're at in that sort of middle ground where it's like, I think of it as an assimilation, then you get a little bit stuck. Right.
Right. And I think that's why it's so important to just be present, because if you're always like looking at that list of things that you need to accomplish, which are great to have, whether you make them in a vision board or it's a physical list or whatever it is, it's like when you can just stop in this moment, which I feel like I've been better at, just even though I'm like busy all the time, like I do slow down and just look around and be like, okay, this is cool. This is amazing. I'm enjoying this. It's not exactly what I thought it would be, but like, what is amazing about this? And I think that I've always been a pretty positive person, but I think it's even more now. Like I have a greater sense of gratitude. I've done the gratitude journals, but like, I just think that even if I'm not like sitting down and being like, okay, today I'm grateful for, it's just naturally happening. Like, oh, this is like I'm sitting in the library and I think it's like a really cool space. And I'm just thankful for this like small things and just being more present. So then it's not like you're so worried about like, did I exactly achieve that goal?
True.
The way that it was meant to be.
Yeah. So one thing, and then we can wrap up with any other tidbits you'd like to share. But one thing that a lot of us as recovering perfectionists sort of struggle with is impatience and anger. And a lot of it is directed at ourselves. And then sometimes it can be directed at others as well. But I know that there's that discord that we have, because it's like, we just want to feel at ease. We just want to feel peace, but there's always something to do. And then even if we do it, it's not right. And so there's just always kind of this bubbling stew of just discontent. And I think that was an area that, you had identified that, hey, I want to be working on feeling more satisfied with where I am, with who I am, right? And not feeling so angry or upset about things as they happen.
Right. And I think it's been a part of who I am so long to have those reactions that I will admit they have not, it's not like they just went away. But what I find is that if those emotions of insecurity or self-doubt or anger arise, I do move through them quicker.
Yeah.
That doesn't become my everyday reality. I almost, like they say, don't go over it or under it or around it, go through it. And so I allow myself to be like, okay, there's a reason why you're feeling this, honor it, maybe surrender to it, and then move forward. And so that is like one thing that my mom definitely did notice, is like that I don't sit and stew about something for 24 hours or a week or a month like I used to. It's like, I take the time, I say the things. I'm a very like, I need to talk through things. So, but then I can let that situation go or move forward from it.
Right. I think what you said is key. And this is what we work on. This is what I work on, right? Is like, we have this idea in our minds, like, oh, well, when I'm at this level, like things are never going to bother me, or everything's just sort of going to be perfect, or it's like, that's actually never the truth. The truth is
it's never going to be.
Right. And learning that, okay, like when that thing triggers me, or when I would typically stew in it, like being like, oh, that's what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. This is no longer helpful. I allowed myself, like, maybe I need to have a temper tantrum about it. Maybe I need to write about it. Maybe I need to talk to somebody about it. But just being able to like stop and reassess where you are. And I think that, for myself, for my clients, like being able to create a whole perspective shift on what you're going through, that is really important to me. And I think that if we can allow ourselves to be like, okay, so when nothing's ever going to be perfect, but I'm able to move through these discomforts quicker, then that's progress, right? That's progress.
That's progress.
You know, I have tools to do it. I trust that these tools are going to work. And I trust that if I'm feeling stuck, like I will know what to do, you know? So yeah, I agree. Like it's never going away.
Right. And I also think too, and this is like something that I've always carried with me, even before working, is like, I think I read it in a Martha Beck book. She's a life coach, about the idea of living backwards. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to have the dark to appreciate the light. So when these things kind of fall apart in your life, I've learned to be like, you may not recognize in the moment, like there's a reason why this is happening, or maybe this is for my benefit. Mm-hmm. But it's like, if you get to a point in your life where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of this. But like these things had to previously happen, good or bad, right, to get to this point. So I think I also sometimes, even when they're hard and you don't want to go through the ugly stuff, like I think we have ugly stuff. That's just life. But it's like, you know, maybe, you know, if you got laid off from your job, which has happened to me in my career, very early on in my career, you know, and I could have looked at it as like, you know, like the worst thing that possibly happened, because that was my career path and that's what I wanted. But it was like, it opened up this amazing life. Like if I had just stayed in that job, who knows, I could still be there. And I never would have lived in New Zealand and South Korea and met people, have friends all over the world, and had all these really cool experiences. So, you know, honoring those things that are not so good is sometimes a key or a gateway to something better.
Right. And that's definitely, I think, where you've always wanted to live. You know, even when we started working together, it's like, that's the piece. Like, I want to trust that it's all going to come together, you know? So even when like, there's a lot, when I work with people, I think that you have to have this idea of being hopeful, because if you don't have hope, you know, what do you have? So it sometimes it feels a little like, not just woo woo, but it feels a little like, oh, Mary, you're just so in the clouds. And it's like, you know, I'd rather be a little bit more on the, you know, hopeful, possibility, magical side than on nothing ever works out for me. I don't know why I'm even here. What's the point? Right? Like, it's just, it's no fun to be there. It's less even about that. It's like no fun. So allowing yourself to find, you know, those pockets where things can feel more alive and more magical, I think they can make quite a shift or quite a difference.
Right. Absolutely.
Is there anything else that you want to share about, you know, what it would be like to work with me as a coach, or anything that, you know, surprised you about the process?
I just think that, you know, I was scared in the beginning, and you know, I think probably for me it was like the investment in myself was like one of my biggest deterrents, because I'm like self-care, bring it in, you know. But I understanding that you are worthy to invest in yourself on a level where you are going to see like extreme change, like very positive change. And then I think it's also realizing that you may be 2 months in and you may not feel any different, but it's like, it's going to get there because you're putting the work in, and it is work, and it's not always pretty. And people won't always understand your journey, and you may not live very openly about all the stuff that you're doing, but it's like, it's your journey. And I just think that anytime we can work with someone like as amazing as Mary, like, I think that you are just setting yourself up for success and finding the path that you're passionate and that aligns with your purpose.
So I'm just going to ask a follow-up on this. So when you think back to the effort right? That you were doing. You're like, it was effort, right? How, like, I think a lot of people are like, how much effort is this going to take? Like, how much time and ever, how much work is it? Like, what would you say to somebody who's thinking like, oh my gosh, it's going to take so much work for me to do this, and I don't know if I have the energy and capacity to do the things?
Right. I think for me, I was on a different time zone. I was in California. So like for me, it was like I was getting up at 5 a.m. to do calls with you. And so that was like a commitment. I don't really feel like your homework is overbearing. I felt like it's all very manageable, not a lot of work. But I think if you just go through it really quickly, then you're not really honoring the process in yourself. So although it's something that you could whip up in 5 minutes, I think the more time you really stew on the homework in between the sessions is you're just doing it to benefit yourself. Mm-hmm. Like no one's making you do anything. You could leave all your worksheets blank and Mary would be like, I don't really want you to do that, but that's your choice. Right. So, so I don't really, I mean, it's minimal. I mean, it's so minimal to the amount of time we spend watching Netflix.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just don't watch a half hour of Netflix and then you have the time to do your coaching homework. Exactly. So it's very minimal, but it's as little or as much as you want it to be, I think.
Right. And I think that that's important. I have something going on with my eye. But I think that that's a piece that's really important, is that it is a process and it is something that does take effort, but it's like you're sprinkling in these mindful moments and you're sprinkling in the awareness, and you're doing a little bit of everything or maybe not even everything. You're doing a little bit of something every day. And it's the fact that the little effort, because I'm about less is more, and about trying my best to help everyone make things as simple as possible so you do them. So as you're allowing that to take place, you can still see such a benefit, such a return on your investment of time and energy.
Right. So, I'm going to have a moment where I'm like really vulnerable here, but one of the very first assignments you gave me, I still have not done. I write it on my monthly goals to do, and it's still something, I mean, believe me, like I said, I am a work in progress. I still am working through this, but like the idea of mirror work, I don't want to give away all your things, but like, I still struggle to look myself in the mirror and, really, even though I've grown so much and care about myself so much more, that's like one piece of homework that's still on my to-do list. And we stopped one-on-one coaching like way over 6 months ago. So,
and so here's the thing, like, as Amy has alluded to, this is a journey. And so I know a lot of people, when they think about, oh my gosh, doing something for 6 months or doing something for a year, like we can make so much strides in a month. We can do a 30-day challenge. We can do anything for a little bit amount of time, but it's the maintenance. It's this being able to be in the like transition phase, that's where the beauty and the alchemy of it all come together. And it's not fun. So like, even having this thing that you're like, I still am struggling to do that. That's okay. It's a process. Right. And I think that as we allow ourselves to be that work in progress, and as we allow ourselves to get closer to the things that are like those vulnerable things. Yeah. I mean, for people don't seem to believe it, but like, I couldn't ever look in the mirror and like enjoy what I saw. I just thought, you're just gross. You're disgusting. I hate you. Right. And it's like getting to a point where it's like, I look in the mirror now and I'm like, oh my God, I love you. You're amazing.
Right.
That took forever. Like, I think I went back to a journal and it was like 10 years ago, where I was like, if I could just love myself and be able to see that. Right. So it takes time to get there, because there's also the thing like, oh, am I being boastful and like there's all these other things that come up too, right? So allowing yourself to see the beauty of you as a human and that you're here, it takes time. And I think that that's a-okay, right?
Yes.
Right.
Work in progress, right?
Totally. Exactly.
And I believe me, like if you sign up for Mary's programs, you like when you said like, oh gosh, doing something for 6 months, you're going to crave when your sessions run out, you're going to crave more time with her. So when you're like, hey, you want to do a phone call and talk about your thing? I was like, yeah, that's time with Mary. And, I think the important thing too, is like, you do the work, like, you as the client, if you sign up and it's your journey, but Mary's just like such a light and such a wonderful, positive person to have in your corner. So it's like, you will, continue to sign up for the programs and want more. So take this as my stamp of approval that, just sign up.
Just sign up.
Whether you want to, join the nurtured community, or you want to join one of the other journeys she has, or a yoga class just to test it out. But I really am a huge fan of the one-on-one coaching program.
Yay. Yeah. I just feel like, like Amy said at the beginning, just being able to work with somebody else and to support them. So, it's so true. Amy did all the work and I just got to be like the cheerleader and kind of direct or redirect or help her shift or like figure out a way to make things easier on her to do the thing. But I mean, ultimately it comes down to her and learning how to trust herself. And she already, she already had so much of that going on. And it's just a matter of sinking in deeper into all of that. And it's just so beautiful to watch.
Thank you.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with me and sharing with everyone else. So
absolutely. Thank you, Mary.
Bye.